Welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. There is so much noise on the interweb these days about what women should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to their fitness and health. Not only is it all too often tied to shame and fixing our bodies, it can also be incredibly detrimental to our health and wellness overall. The Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast sorts through the BS and offers advice and actionable tactile steps to support and build a better relationship to your amazing body through every stage of womanhood. It aims to break the cycle of keeping women in the dark about their extraordinary machines and revolutionize the way we move, eat, and live so that our daughters and our daughters' daughters look in the mirror and feel exactly what they are: fierce, beautiful, and capable of everything. The revolution starts here. Hello, and welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. Kinsey here, and I'm so happy, as always, to be here with all of you. My goal for by the end of September, I have this new intro that I am planning to do, and I just have not done it yet. So cross your little fingies that she'll have it all set and ready to go. You're going to be like, what podcast is this? It'll be the same. It'll just be a new intro. So Kinsey here. Intro not written and done yet. So hello, super happy to be here. I took a break last week. Honestly, it was just because I was out of town, but it also kind of timed out perfectly because I feel like last week was a heavy hitter. Diet culture, man. I'll tell you what, choosing to record a podcast about diet culture in your luteal phase is a bold move. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way because it conjures all the feels. So I hope you had a wonderful week off. I sure missed you. Like I said, I was out of town. One of my dearest and longest friends is getting married like 2 weeks after us, which is crazy because, oh yeah, life update. Our wedding is like a month away. So it's the 15th that I'm recording this. Oh my God, when I release this podcast, we will be exactly a month away from our wedding, which is exciting and so crazy. If you are out there and you have planned a wedding before, feel free to send some hearts and I believe in yous, because who knew there was so much work? I think I've talked about this plenty of times before, but wow. Like I said, mostly excited. We got all the big dial movers down, but anywho, we were out celebrating my other friend who's getting married 2 weeks later. And we were in New Orleans. It was magical and witchy and delightful. And I'm happy to be home. Minnesota's in this phase where it's like a teasing fall. When I left, it was 50s, 60s and sweater weather, delicious. And now I'm back and it's slight like coloration in the leaves. There's some oranges and yellows and it's 85 degrees. So you know what? We're getting there. Baby steps. Anywho, that's my quick little life update. And I figure let's just dive in. Today is a podcast that is, we'll talk about it in a second, but is inspired because I have something upcoming that this is going to be just one of the topics that we cover in this thing that's coming up. And I was like, you know what? We haven't really talked about our menstrual cycle in a while. And that is a pretty big thing, y'all. Pretty much right up until menopause, right? Because menopause, as it might blow our minds to hear, menopause is just one day. And we decide, or we know that we've hit menopause 12 months after the fact. So it's retrospectively. Menopause is the final day of our final period. So our menstrual cycle is the thing that dictates, in many ways, where it dictates totally where we are along our perimenopause transition. So whether you're in your 20s, whether you're in your 50s, whether you just had your first period or you're pretty sure you've had your last, this episode is for you. And if you're in your 60s, 70s, and you're like, man, I was talking to my mother-in-law the other day because I was on my period and she's like, I don't miss that at all. And I was like, I hear you, girl. And also like, I've got some mad love for my period for a lot of reasons, but anywho, this is something you can look back to and maybe hear or learn retrospectively, whatever. Learn now what was going on then. So everybody can benefit. And for all my people out there who were not born with ovaries, so for the boyfriends and the dads and the brothers and the friends and the support systems, this is really important to know too, because it is what is literally happening in our bodies every single month. And it is a huge part of who we are and why we are the way we are. So everybody should know about women's health, period, end. Yay. One of my goals for this year, 2025, which is now swiftly becoming like 2026 Eve. Have you guys noticed that? That's pretty wild. We're in September. What? One of my goals for 2025, and honestly, when I restarted this podcast, but as I'm starting to launch into this first round of Fit After 40 small group personal training, is not just to train women and their amazing machines, but leaning into educating women why we need to be making these conscious lifestyle shifts really at any age, but especially as we enter 50s, 60s, 70s. It is never too late, and it never becomes more important for these shifts as at when we get older. And then I want, through this education, to not only instill why we should be doing this, but set them up with realistic action steps to actually make and stick to these healthy, lifelong behavior changes. At the time of this recording, which I feel like is a phrase I've said about 17 times already, so that's the theme of this podcast, I have my first 2 upcoming in-person workshops, which I am so excited about. This is literally like pipe dream coming true, and I am just both like incredibly thrilled and low-key kind of nervous, right? When you do something new, even when you love it, I'll be honest, there's like a moment of like, I literally get a little imposter syndrome. I get like a little nervous, and I love coaching. I love being in front of people. I love having conversations with women. It's just something that's new. So it's this like very clear balance of nerve-sighted, which always just reminds me that if we're not a little bit nervous for something, it's probably not that important to us. So point is, super freaking excited. Both of these workshops are going to be in this month. Maybe the second one is the very beginning of October. I think they're both in September. One of them is going to be for my legacy crew, which is women 50 and older. And the second is a group of new moms who are mostly in their 30s. There might be like a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old here, but women who are with their like in the first like couple years of motherhood. And guess what? The cool thing is that the material is pretty much the same. These 2 groups are just the way that they got divided because of the locations I'm leading the workshops in. But when it comes to caring for our bodies, it turns out the majority of what we're going to talk about is the same. Because one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to training, and honestly just health in general, when we're thinking about taking care of ourselves through a perimenopausal transition and beyond, is that we have to do things drastically different than when we did it in other phases of our life. The truth is, the only difference we really see possibly is the nuances, right? So like the load that we're using, the amount of reps and rest that we're taking. Humans of any age, humans, men and women, reap the benefits of strength training, of maximizing quality protein, eating high quality fiber, optimizing sleep, moving more throughout the day, finding ways to manage stress. We've talked about all these things. We even did that 5 hierarchy of women's health. But the key difference that I do plan on focusing on with my women in their 20s through 40s, but again, is really prevalent to anyone who still has or even had a menstrual cycle and anyone who wants to support a person with a menstrual cycle, is the importance of learning about our cycle, knowing what's going on, learning how to track it, and using the information that we're gathering to better our health across the board. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go over a 30,000-foot view, like way up there, of what the H is happening in our body during our cycle. We're going to talk about how to track our cycle, and we're going to talk about why we need to do it and how to use it when it comes to advocating for our health through pretty much every phase of womanhood. I've done 2 pretty in-depth episodes in the past. One is optimizing your training around your menstrual cycle, and 2 is we need to track our menstrual cycles. I went back and I read through those transcripts. I'm actually very happy. I wasn't sure. Side note, you know me and my tangents. full disclosure, when I did the one about optimizing training around your menstrual cycle, I was curious what I wrote because there was a lot of information. Like I said, I was learning more about menstrual cycles at the time. There was a whole bunch of like Instagram and was going crazy with like, this is the exercise you should do in luteal, and this is the early follicular and mid follicular and ovulation. And it was like every single thing you were doing different things. And I was like, how much did I buy into that? And how much did I go off of like what I did with clients and N of one? And I'm pleased to say that it's a very good one because, spoiler, listen to your body, right? That just is how it always goes. Listen to your body. Honestly, it's kind of what we talked about in Hierarchy of Health, but more dialed into our menstrual cycle. I go over really in detail each phase of our menstrual cycle, both follicular, luteal, and then referring to them as Maisie Hill puts it, and I forget who she gets it from originally, but the seasons of our menstrual cycle. So you learn a lot in that episode. And I was, like I said, patted myself on the back because I didn't totally fall into the hype, which it can be easy to do, right? That's why one of the reasons I am so passionate about people working with professionals is there's just constantly this influx of information. And again, while now there's just as many voices who are like, don't you dare train according to your cycle. That is the patriarch trying to keep women, like it's just always like the pendulum, right? But for me, some of the like calmer voices when it was first coming up who were sort of like chirping like this isn't necessarily like grain of salt, I liked because their whole point was it's very hard to progressive overload if you're constantly changing the way you exercise. And for a lot of us who didn't have like who have been doing this longer than that burst of Instagram, we've been doing the same training over all phases of our cycle. The big takeaway there was that it just gives us a little bit more compassion. So if we are waking up, maybe we didn't sleep. I definitely deal with insomnia sometimes over my cycle. Maybe we just feel like garbage. It gives ourselves permission to understand what's going on. It gives us permission to adjust it if we want, and gives us permission to skip it if we want, because we know that this is just happening now and it's not going to happen forever. I say it all the time, but the first 2 days of my period, the last thing I want to do is anything. So for me, those lately I've been honoring more and more as rest days just because I feel so bone tired. Maybe I'll go for walks and sometimes I'll go work out, but you know, it just gives us information on how to listen to our body, take care of our body, understand what's going on. But like I said, both of those EPs have links in the show notes, and they're definitely good listen-tos. They're good to listen to because we deep dive in each of them into those topics. So training around your menstrual cycle or not, and why we need to track menstrual cycles. So those are going to be like, if we start peeling the onion today and you're like, I must have more, go to those because they are action-packed. I'm quite pleased, if I do say so myself. Like I said, though, it's been a while since these episodes have come out, and it's hard sometimes to wrap our brains around perimenopause, both in terms of hormones and WTF, why do we have all these symptoms, if we don't first understand what's happening in our reproductive years. So if we're just sort of like throwing the baby out and diving right into perimenopause, it's really hard to understand what's going on, which brings us to the overarching problem, which is we learn nothing about women's health ever, period. And again, I go deeply into that in both those other episodes, and why, yet again, I'm such a major proponent of not just teaching women how to work out and do it correctly for feeling better in their 50s and 60s than they ever did in their 20s, because that's pretty fetch, but also teaching women what the H is actually happening in our bodies, especially if we're just starting to learn about our bodies in our perimenopausal, our menopause, and our postmenopausal years, because it really is an evolutionary life cycle. It's looking at the butterfly, right? We've got the egg, we've got, I was going to say worm, the little caterpillar, we've got the chrysalis, we've got the butterfly. Menopause is the chrysalis, postmenopause is the butterfly, perimenopause, caterpillar, reproductive years is the egg, right? If we just look at the caterpillar, we have no idea where it came from. We have no idea where it's coming. So we kind of have to pull the whole thing out and look at it as the continuum that it is. Between seeing members of my family and my close friends' families who we lose due to falls, due to Alzheimer's, to moving grandparents into single-story homes without stairs, to learning that an average 65-year-old retiring in 2025 can expect to spend an average of $172,500 frickin' dollars on healthcare expenses throughout retirement alone. Lifestyle changes become more and more and more a non-negotiable for me, and my hope for my clients or the women listening to this podcast. Honestly, I just need women and all humans to know that lifestyle can change the trajectory of their life. It's the little fire that wakes me up in the morning. So if you've been looking to deep dive into taking care of your health, I will actually be running my first version of an online workshop, totally free, on September 28th. Stay tuned. I'm going to release more details closer to that time. I'm really excited. I'm hoping to learn some stuff in these first two in-person that I can bring into the online one. Like I said, it's totally free. In the meantime, please go ahead and hop on the wait list for the go and hop on the Fit After 40 newsletter. That's just going to be tons of great resources and information. It'll also give you the information when the time comes for that free webinar. Also, go ahead and check out the commitment free wait list for our in-person Twin Cities and online small group personal training cohorts for Fit After 40, which start in November, which literally will be here. I feel like I'm going to stop recording this podcast and then suddenly it's going to be November. So, anywho, let's go ahead, dive in. Why does knowing about our cycle help to set us up for success in perimenopause? We kind of talked about that metaphor of the butterfly transition, but simply put, it's the flux of our sex hormones that lead to most perimenopausal symptoms, and eventually it's what leads to the end of our cycle altogether, menopause into postmenopause. It's easy to forget in our children heated environments, in our office buildings, in our schools, our museums, our libraries, our well-stocked grocery stores, our ability to get lost in a 24-hour Love Island binge that we are and always have been, rather, animals. We're animals. At our core, instinctually, we are, to this day, driven by preserving our life, being accepted by others because we survive better as a herd, and shooting out babies, reproducing. Menopause is the end of our reproductive years. I just heard it recently. I think it was Dr. Stacy Sims who said it's kind of like a new birthday, right? It's just that one day on the calendar where your reproductive years are done. Final day of your final period. Our cycle, menstrual cycle, which while often demonized for its put you on your keister cramps and the Jekyll and Hyde mood swings, who's with me, is the whole reason we can or cannot reproduce in the first place. As we've talked about before, our menstrual cycle is so much more than a 2 to 8 day period of bleeding. It's this intricate cacophony of hormones working all day long, up and down our HPO axis, so our hypothalamus, pituitary, ovarian axis. More on that in a moment. But let's pull back. So the day of the egg, right? The very first period we ever have is called our menarche, which is actually kind of fun because in my mind, I'm imagining a monarch. So that's our menarche. That's day one of our first period. One day, boop, there it is. If you were born in my generation, early on in your cycle, you were probably put on oral birth control to help mitigate your symptoms or quote unquote regulate your cycle. I remember it was like 15 or 16, I came crying. She was shook to the mother of my boyfriend at the time, who was like some kind of doctor. I was a teenager. I didn't really even know there were different doctors for things. All I knew is that she was a doctor and I had been bleeding for like 32 days straight, and I was not okay with it. I was freaked out. It was, we talked about it. My mom has always been really open, but it's just, I felt so much shame around it. I felt freaked out. I went from like, I guess kind of meh periods to suddenly I just couldn't stop bleeding. Like, that's pretty freaky deaky. By no fault of her own, she told me that that was indeed irregular, because sure, and that I should talk to my doctor, which is very good advice, actually. She was not my practicing doctor. I should talk to my doctor. I did. And they popped me on birth control, which I then remained on until I was 25. So I spent 10 of my most developmental years on the pill. It wasn't until about 35 that I realized what I and so many other women get popped on BC for isn't in fact problematic at all. It's completely normal. For all intents and purposes, the early phase of our periods is like a trial run for our body. Our body is getting used to cycling, and our sex hormone system is still developing. So that stuff is normal. Once we have been cycling for a few years, then obviously that's where it's like, oh, that's an interesting that this is something that to be looked into if you're missing periods, if you're super irregular, if you have heavy bleeding. But when you're early on, that's pretty darn normal. So similar to perimenopause, when we start running out of viable eggs, it is completely normal early on to see irregular periods and short to long bouts of bleeding. This whole prescription of the BC and not getting to root causes or even having a conversation before getting put on. Maybe they had one with my mom, but I doubt it, other than like getting her to sign off. It's a huge topic. It's a topic for another time. But our periods are a vital sign for us, which we talk about a lot in the ep about why I talk about the importance of cycle tracking. So definitely listen to that. Fertility Friday, I'm blanking on the woman who leads that. She wrote a book called Fifth Vital Sign. She's also amazing, especially if you're trying to get pregnant. Check out Fertility Friday. She's outstanding. She also does a lot of fun deep dives into research papers. So I adore her. Point is, bigger topic. We talk about a little on that other episode. And birth control, while it absolutely is a wonderful tool for independence, it does interrupt our natural hormone cycle and can lead to a lot of down the line issues, which is why, as always, I am such a huge advocate for having full conversations about what things mean long term and then making the educated decision. As we're seeing now, when women come off of birth control after decades, we're either seeing reliving old symptoms that were never actually, like the root cause was never treated. We just slapped a Band-Aid on it. Or we're seeing people having trouble getting pregnant. So it's a big deal. Dr. Jolene Brighton is another really wonderful source of information on this. She wrote a full book called Beyond the Pill that I think is a must read for all my ladies currently using contraception, or if you've considered it or you've been on it in the past. It just was my first sort of glimpse into, oh man, there should have been a conversation about this. And especially if you're like experiencing sort of any irregularity, she can be a great source too. That book goes over why periods take a while to come back or what might be happening with your fertility. So once our hormonal system comes fully online, our sex hormones, we are welcome into our reproductive years. And so begins the glorious dance of our HPO axis. Again, completely 30,000 foot view of this relationship goes along the lines of hypothalamus in our brain releases a hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnR, which in turn signals our pituitary gland to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These two hormones play an important role in communicating to our ovaries. In my ladies, FSH, that follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone, act primarily to activate ovaries to produce estrogen and inhibin, both two hormones that regulate the menstrual cycle and ovarian cycle. Stay with me. We're getting a little in the weeds. Like I said, just have fun with this. Estrogen forms a negative feedback loop by inhibiting the production of GnRH in the hypothalamus. Inhibin acts to inhibit activin, which is peripherally produced hormone that positively stimulates GnRH producing cells. So basically what we're saying here is hypothalamus talks pituitary glands talk to the ovaries. We start working on developing an egg, choosing the winner, chicken dinner. We're releasing estrogen. That sends up a sign back to the hypothalamus to stop releasing so much gonadotropin. It's a cycle, right? It's a big, beautiful cycle. Interestingly, metabolic hormones also come into play, specifically with GnRH. Leptin, which is that satiety hormone, essentially hits up the GnRH with information that the body is well fed and safe to support new life. Or if we're in our entering puberty years, says, hey, all set, go ahead into puberty. So yay for baby, yay for puberty. We're fed, we're taken care of. Let's do this thing. Whereas ghrelin, our hunger hormone, or as I like to call it, gremlin, when elevated over long periods of time, signals the body that it's unsafe to allocate energy needs away from the basic function of keeping a woman alive. So it might delay puberty for younger women, and it also can make it register to your body that it's unsafe to have a baby. So eating is an important safety tool in helping your body learn that it's okay to create new life. Because if it feels like it doesn't have enough resource to keep you alive, the last thing it's going to do is then allocate sparse resources towards creating a baby. Okay, back to it. During the follicular phase, so that's going to be that first part, right? That's from the first day of your period up into ovulation. Rising estrogen levels from developing follicles in the ovaries exert positive feedback on the hypothalamus and pituitary, leading to the luteinizing hormone surge that triggers eventually ovulation when we release the egg. Remember, when we are in that first phase, our body chooses a couple different follicles, and then there's one winner. That one develops and releases into the egg, and then the other ones just sort of go by it and die. There's more science to it. But the point is, we're using a couple eggs each round, and there's one winner per round. When we ovulate, we're dropping that egg. Just like menarche, just like menopause, ovulation is technically 1 day. After ovulation, the corpus luteum, or what's left of the egg, produces progesterone, which inhibits the GnRH secretion from the hypothalamus and the gonadotropin release from the anterior pituitary, thus terminating the estrogen luteinizing hormone positive feedback loop. So, wow, it's so much more than cramps and anger and bleeding a couple days a month, right? That is a huge 30,000 foot view. And like I said, wouldn't it be freaking nuts if they decided to teach us any of that? Because that's a lot going on. And it's beautiful. And it's amazing. And it's the reason that a woman can literally create another living human being. So that's pretty freaking magic. And it's also why there's a lot of room for dysregulation, right? With all those steps, there sure are different points along the way that can kind of go bloop and the whole thing is off. It's why, as women, we, for better or for worse, must slip into an ownership role when it comes to our health. And honestly, I didn't write this, but it is incredibly empowering and important. One of the best acts of taking care of yourself, self-care, feminism, is learning about your body and then learning why it's doing what it's doing, and then advocating for care that is correct when it is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's true. Every woman is unique, and everything from her cycle length to her symptoms to if she's ovulating, because we absolutely can and oftentimes do still have a period, but that doesn't necessarily mean we ovulated. That's how it works for most birth control, as well as early on in our cycles, we'll have anovulatory bleeds where we don't ovulate, but we still have our period in those wild preteen, teenage years. And that's what happens in perimenopause sometimes as we start to run out of eggs. Even a doctor who is trained in menopause, the unicorns they are, the beautiful, beautiful unicorns they are going to be less capable of collecting important data on your health than you are, because you live in that awesome body every stinking a day. So what are we looking for then? Symptoms and cycle regularity. When we are in our reproductive years, cycle regularity is an indication of our overall health. I've shared it in the past that I'm pretty sure I did, that I have a fairly regular cycle. Now, yay, woohoo, that's awesome. Currently, it's exactly at the median when they give the example of how long a cycle is of 28 days, which it wasn't. It actually has gotten a little longer over the past 2 years, but whatever. When I'm experiencing a lot of stress, one thing that shows up in my tracking, generally it's work related, I see my cycle length both shorten and lengthen significantly, like 31, 32 days before my next period. And it always is a sign to me now because I track it every day for the most part. Some days I don't, but for the most part, it's a sign to me pretty early on that I need to make some changes, prioritizing my well-being, or at the very least have a conversation with myself if the effort I'm putting in right now is worth it in the long run. Because sometimes life be life. For whatever reason, we gotta burn the candle at both ends. So make that deal with yourself. Is this one worth it? It's also going to be very hard to family plan if your cycle is irregular, since it'll be hard to tell A, when you're ovulating, and B, if you're ovulating at all. Especially if you're buying those ovulation pea strips. I know they're not super cheap. So if you have a pretty regular cycle, doing the days around day 14 is usually a pretty good time to see if you're ovulating. Not a fertility expert, just like I said, Fertility Friday, great resource. If you are in your reproductive years and premenopausal, thinking up until 35 when perimenopause can start. And honestly, I just listened to an interview with Stacey Sims. She's the first person who I've heard say this, so grain of salt. I haven't done more research on following it up, but perimenopause can start as early as 32, which is pretty wild. Not totally shocking, but I'm going to put a pin in that because, like I said, didn't really do any research. I just thought it was interesting. So if your point is, if you're premenopausal, you're in your reproductive years and your cycles are irregular, it's time to do some sleuthing on how to regulate your cycle, because it is not normal to have, I shouldn't say normal, it's not, something's up with your body if your cycles are irregular. This could be due to hormonal imbalances. So estrogen dominance, we see a lot of, every once in a while we see, I would say it's mostly estrogen dominance, but it can be other things. Could be a cortisol dysregulation, could be an insulin dysregulation, hormone imbalances. Could be lifestyle. Like I mentioned, for me, a lot of the time, it's that high stress situation that I end up in. It could be excessive weight loss or weight gain. It could be under eating. It could be over exercising, anything like that that puts lifestyle stressor on you. It could be adjusting to getting on or off birth control, or it could be a medical issue such as PCOS, thyroid disorders, fibroids, obesity, and a lot of other things can be tied into that. So we need to stay on top of it for our health in general. It is also possible and likely that it's a variation of multiple causes, right? Maybe it's a lot of stress, we are overweight, we have PCOS, and we just got off birth control, right? All these little things can play together. To me, one of the best things we can do for setting ourselves up for a healthy menopausal transition and a better life in general is using our reproductive years to deal with underlying causes of irregular periods, which is why it's so important to me to educate people in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s about their cycle, because the more we can do before we hit perimenopause, the more set up for success we're going to be. Not only does it give us more information about when we're entering perimenopause, but all those issues that I listed above, the hormonal imbalances, the lifestyle issues, the medical issues, those can and they will lead to worse symptoms in perimenopause and can make us far more susceptible to all-cause morbidity, both in the transition through menopause and beyond into our postmenopausal years. And talk to any woman who's in perimenopause. The last thing you want to do is have to rely on making huge dial mover changes. You absolutely can. I will absolutely help you. But it is the absolute truth that when we're in the middle of something, it's a lot harder emotionally, physically, and energetically to make those changes. So the earlier we get started, the better. But as always, it is never too late, and it will absolutely benefit you no matter what age you're at. Our period, my point here, is absolutely 100% a vital sign of how our body is working on the inside. It is time for us and our medical providers, quite frankly, to stop treating heavy, irregular periods as another annoying part of being a woman, slapping on a pain med in a hot pack and saying, Godspeed, young one, and staring at that information, sleuthing through it and understanding for what it is, which is our body literally screaming for help. When we have symptoms, it is our body trying its darndest to communicate with us. Okay, so let's assume we're pretty darn regular. We've got things sorted out. We're having our period roughly the same amount of days every cycle. Our period itself is roughly the same amount of days every cycle. Now we're getting into perimenopause. What's happening then? Surprise! It's another hugely complicated symphony, but it includes the same cast and characters hormonally as our reproductive years. The biggest difference and driver in this time is that our ovaries are running out of viable follicles, aka our eggs. Remember, women are born with the set amount of eggs they're ever going to have. Shoot, we got those puppies before we're born. So eventually, if we're lucky to live long enough, we will run out of eggs. That means there can be anywhere from a slight to incredibly major disruption in that HPO axis, and it affects every single symptom in our body, which is why symptoms of peri and postmenopause hit such a vast array, right? They're literally everything. When we are in postmenopause, we are officially out of eggs. And after a few years, our hormones, they actually begin to rebalance out, or they start to rebalance the same way they did after our first period. So we officially enter into that same normal. So there is still that flux of symptoms and irregularity anywhere from like 4, sometimes up to 8 to 10 years after the day of menopause. But eventually, just like after our first period, hormones balance out and suddenly we're in the calm again. And that's our new normal, which is pretty spanking cool if you ask me. And I feel like we should be talking about it a lot more because it certainly gives, at least to me, like the pot of gold. Well, rainbows are wonderful. Okay, so it's not just all downhill, right? Like eventually we find this new normal. And if we're taking care of ourselves through the transition and even before, that new normal is going to be pretty freaking spectacular, right? Because we haven't lost a crap ton of bone, muscle, our heart is still healthy, we're moving, we're independent, we have mobility. It is why we work hard now. So when we hit that new normal, our bodies are functioning and we can live our lives. So, how do I track my cycle? As with any behavior change, I want you to shoot for something that you feel 9 to 10 out of 10 confident that you can stick with. There are obviously a ton of apps out there. I used Flow, FLO, for many years, but personally I've stopped. I moved away. I was already starting to get a little wiggly about the data collection, honestly, but moreover, I wasn't really great at tracking my symptoms on the app, and I still felt really removed from my cycle. For example, I knew when my last period was. I could look it up and tell the doctor, but I didn't know how long that cycle was. So I might have known that it ended on the 3rd of January, but I wouldn't have known how long it ran for. If you prefer an app, heck yeah, get it, sister. As always, your body, your rules. I just want you tracking. Maisie Hill, who in my mind is the goddess of periods, recommended Clue, Kindra, and Natural Cycle. So Clue, Kindra, Kindra, and Natural Cycles. I haven't used these myself, but she had a lot of good things to say about them. If you read her book, Period Power, another must. She also just came out with Perimenopause Power, which I will be buying and reading after I'm finally finished with the Menopause Manifesto, which is dense and wonderful. It is, if you are like, man, why didn't they make a handbook for being a woman? They did, and it's called the Menopause Manifesto. Dr. Jen Gunter, shout out. Point is, I haven't tried these. She highly recommends them. Full transparency, this was a few years ago that book came out. They may have changed hands, so they may have been bought and aren't as good, or they might have just gone out of commission, but it's worth looking into if you prefer an app. Personally, I like to use the method that Maisie Hill uses for tracking. Each day, you write the day of your cycle, the date, and a word to describe your mood or feeling that day. I've turned it into a few more words each day, and I also like to include my symptoms. Obviously, you listen to this podcast, you know I'm verbose. I just like to make it almost not a journal entry. It's like Twitter, where it's like 140, OG Twitter, 140 words or less. You can do it by hand in a notebook. I like to do it on my notes app because then I can quickly search things like day 19 and I can see trends over time. So how does this help? Why add tracking into our lives? One, it helps to see if our period is regular. Reminder, if the answer is no, it's not, it's time to investigate. Now is the time to take back your health because it's only going to get harder from here on out. So, and I don't mean that to scare you. I should figure out a better way to say it because I mean it to empower you. Now is the best time to get started. The best time. It never gets easier than right now. There we go. Does that sound more empowering? Because it should. Two, it helps us see if our symptoms trend the same way over time. For example, I mean that in two ways. So, for example, this last cycle, I was pretty freaking tired every single day of my cycle. I know. It surprises folks, especially when they come and work out with me, but I do. I get tired. I get so tired between planning a wedding, starting this business, coaching, family stuff, solo pup care, what I'm now wondering if it's the beginning phases of perimenopause. I ran my adrenals pretty damn ragged, and it showed every single day of my tracking. The info I got, if I am pooped when I'm ovulating, aka when I'm usually really feeling myself and like up to do anything. My ovulation, I'm a go-getter on that day. Something's got to shift. Or like I said, I have to recognize what's going on and make the decision if it's worth it. So in this case, I've talked a lot about sort of looking at where stressors lie and where we can take them out. There really wasn't much that I could take out. So my adjustment was, one, recognizing it wasn't going to be this way forever. Eventually, we're going to be married. Eventually, Marcus will be back home and I'll have someone helping me with the dog. Eventually, things will shift. So this wasn't something where I'm like setting myself up for long-term disaster. And for two, I just started tweaking the way I approached my days in a way that made it a little gentler. Instead of trying to do everything every day, I would decide each day which task was my priority. Was I going to be planning a wedding? Was I going to be setting up for a launch? Was I going to be taking a rest day? Right? So I each day sort of took it beat by beat. So I used that information to make adjustments. Because sometimes when we're in the middle of it, we don't even know we're drowning unless someone throws us a life preserver and we're like, oh my God, thank God, I didn't realize I only had ab breath left. On the other hand, and this is the like yay side of things, if it's day 19 and I just like want to punch everything, then I can take a breath. I can search day 19 and I can see that every single day that I have my day 19 in my cycle, I want to punch all the things. But by day 23, I'm back in my flow state. And my day 23, like the end of my luteal, like I'm a little bit more emotional and in tune, but like I love the end of my luteal. I'm like, I hit my flow state. So it's really good information. I talk about this a lot and why we need to track our cycles. I know that this feeling of dread is going to go away. And if it doesn't, I know that I need to take action. Okay, 3. It gives us info on if we're in perimenopause. I've seen research claim that in early perimenopause, we tend to have shorter periods versus later perimenopause, where we can see longer and heavier periods with more time in between each period. Some women don't actually see period irregularities early on in menopause, and they experience other symptoms like mood swings or excessive fatigue or brain fog as first indications of their entrance into perimenopause, which that I've shared before has blown my mind. And also it's tricky, right? Because where do we tease out being in perimenopause from just like living? The end. One thing I also want to touch on that I recently learned from, again, Dr. Jen Gunter's The Menopause Manifesto. And I read it again recently on her blog, The Vagenda, which A+ for naming, right? A+. And it's just a great read. She's brilliant and such a funny writer. There is such a thing as entering menopause too early. So having menopause too early, where you have that final day of your final period. She states, and I quote, "If the first period starts at age 12, that isn't surprising. However, if the first period happened at age 4, that's an entirely different story, because menstruation is only part of a normal process when it happens at the expected time. This is similarly true for menopause. When someone is younger than 45 and has not had a period in 3 months, they should have an investigation. The question for our diagnostic test in this situation is, why hasn't there been a menstrual period for 3 months?" So there's always exceptions. For example, if someone has PCOS syndrome and typically only has 3 periods a year, then evaluating 3 months of no bleeding in that context of menopause may or may not be needed. This also doesn't include women who have had hysterectomies, have hormonal IUDs, which cause them not to bleed, or have had endometrial ablations. But again, it is good information to have. I can't remember what podcast I did it on, but we talked about reasons why menopause happens. She goes over early menopause in quite some detail in the Menopause Manifesto. Hello, Kinsey's back. One of the main things that can cause an early menopause, there are many players, but one thing that is tried and true linked to it is smoking cigarettes. And that's all I'm going to say. 4, tracking provides an easy way to habit stack symptom tracking. So habit stack is where we do a habit pretty regularly and then we add a new habit onto it because it's easier to add to a current habit. So like if I am trying to work on balancing and I brush my teeth every night, instead of trying to add 60 seconds to 2 minutes of balancing into my day, I just lift one leg as I brush my bottom teeth and then I balance on my other leg while I brush my top teeth. So I've stacked the habit of brushing my teeth now with balancing. So if we're already tracking, we just add on adding symptoms. Like I said, that's what I do for mine. So if I'm having this cycle, I had really heavy cramps, which is not usual for me. So again, I was coming off of a pretty stressful, bone-tired place. So this isn't too surprising, but it's important for me to keep in mind and becomes even more important as we go through perimenopause and those symptoms potentially start to fly at our faces. Again, some women have no symptoms, so congratulations. If there has been one through line, though, between my menopause coaching certificate and literally all the experts that I listen to or read on perimenopause, it's this, that we need to be tracking our symptoms. We got to. Ideally, like in the perfect world, we would have it down to the details of when the symptom hit and what was happening preceding them. So we could see like correlations and times and things that maybe stressed, gave us a hot flush, etc. But let's be real. IDK about you, but that is not something I'm real great at sticking to. You might be able to. Like I've talked about in the past, I'm not great at food tracking. Other people are. We all just operate a little differently. So if you get your symptom and it just feels good to like sit down, write the time and write what you were doing right before it, hell yeah, congratulations. But if you're like me and you're like, that is never going to happen, so I'm just not going to do it, period, bye. let that go. Don't worry about it. At the very least, at the end of your day, just keep a daily log of the symptoms you remember experiencing. And that's going to be a major tool in taking to our healthcare providers so that we can have larger conversations and discovery around things like, is this perimenopause? Or is it hormonal imbalance? Or is it just stress? Also, a really important thing to bring into the MHT conversation, the menopause hormone therapy conversation. Fun side note, menopause lingo is changing all the time. So on this podcast, I feel like I've only called this HRT, but it is changing all the time. For example, we used to call we call them hot flushes now rather than hot flashes. So for a long time, a lot of the literature will say hot flashes. We've switched it to hot flush because it is a better representation of what a woman is going through in the actual physiological presence of the hot flush. So it's like the bloom from within and then the gradual spread to the entire body. And almost even more important, it's the lack of it actually being like a flash, we're gone, back to normal, right? It's like the flush stays sometimes up to minutes and it can be miserable. So it's just a better representation. The MHT, menopausal hormone therapy, is replacing HRT, hormone replacement therapy, because I might butcher this, but basically we're not replacing hormones. They naturally decline with age. So it isn't as if we should have higher levels of estradiol in our late 40s and early 50s, and we're replacing what's not naturally there. It declines, right? So estradiol is dropping as we age. That's the natural. So we're not replacing something that should be there. We're instead adding hormones therapeutically. So pretty fun stuff. Evolution of language means that we're actually starting to give an H about female bodies. And I love that. A big theme of the last week in our household has been globbing onto and celebrating all the little wins along the way. And for me, that is not just a little win, that's a huge win because language matters. Okay, and the last reason to track, and of course, what is probably most commonly used for, is that it helps us plan when to have le babies or when not to. Like so much of what we focus on at Fit After 40, the sooner we get started, the better. I know I've said that over and over. For one, you're going to see what issues may need to be resolved heading into perimenopause. For twosies, by the time we enter the waters of peri and postmenopause, you're already going to be, in theory, symptom tracking, which means that we can advocate for ourselves with a list of what's happening and for how long it's happening without even having to give it a second thought, right? We're not like in the middle of like not sleeping because we wake up drenched in sweat and our sheets are stuck to our bodies and we fight out of the cocoon and wake up our partner who is already awake because we're so hot we woke them up. Those are my favorite stories where like the partner wakes up because the bed gets so hot and the woman parent who's having the hot flush is like, I'm still asleep. Haha, it's your hot flush now. Point is, you don't have to add something in the midst of that. You've already been doing it. So it's just natural to lean over and write hot flush. And that is really the beauty of getting started. The sooner we get going, the better off we are down the road. But as always, and I cannot ever stress this enough, it is never too late to start tracking. Ever. So there you have it, folks. Today, we covered that 30,000 foot view of what the H is happening during our cycle and how it changes in the perimenopause transition. We talked about how to track your cycle, and we talked about why to do it and how to use it to advocate for your health. As always, it would mean the absolute world to me if you took 4.5 seconds to like, share, subscribe, leave a review. Education around our bodies is the biggest step to both better aging and instilling personal responsibility in doing so, to take control of the driver wheel. Period and symptom tracking is a wonderful entry point to ownership into our health because it can be literally as simple as one word a day. So please share this with a friend or a loved one, or share a review about how it helped you, and let's help women all over the world live that healthy, strong, independent life they deserve. If it's not a 5-star review, hit me up and I'll tell you other podcasts to listen to. the deal, perimenopause and aging, they're not optional, but the support around that transition and beyond, it is. And you abso-freaking-lutely deserve it. So check out the show notes to jump on the newsletter for lots of education in the meantime, to learn about that free upcoming webinar where this is literally just like the tip of the iceberg. Join our commitment free waitlist, which is going to be action steps to actually checking off a huge dial mover, which is learning how to strength train correctly in as little as 2 sessions a week. That waitlist is up. It is going to be very limited spaces. So that waitlist is going to be where you can get a time slot that works for you and not miss out. You also get a fat discount. And in the meantime, my friends, here's to our healthy, happy cycles, bodies, and lives. Until next time, take care of your beautiful body and brains. You are so stinking worth it. Aroo!